We will get started. I just want to first welcome everybody to the 4th Annual Legislative Roundtable. Unfortunately, we're not together, but when we started seeing, more people are interested in coming out of safety concerns with the rising number of COVID, we decided to stay virtual again, which I think was probably a good decision with things that have been happening, unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks. So we are glad everyone could join us here via Zoom. Just if you didn't hear that little thing when you signed on, this is being recorded. We have been asked by a couple of people if they could take some screenshots and then share it on their social media. And if anyone has a problem with that, can you just let us know so that we are aware of that? Otherwise, it's no problem on our end if that's something that you would like to do. We are going to ask that people mute their microphones unless you're speaking, just because to limit that background noise. If one of the hosts decide to mute you, we don't want to hear you, we're just trying to limit that background noise. But please, if you have something to say, unmute yourself, join in the conversation, raise your hand, whatever works best for you is completely acceptable. So I think there's going to be a couple hosts that might just mute people if we hear a lot of background noise. So I want to welcome everyone for coming, all of our state representatives and state senators for coming. It's great to see more and more of you at this roundtable every year. We have 3 topics that we're going to talk about. Hopefully you all got the agenda. And they're just things that, so if you don't know, the Shoreline Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Task Force meets monthly. And one of the things we always allow for discussions, cases. And so what we've done is we compiled 3 topics around things that have come up in the last year. And we would like to, as constituents to all of you, we wanted to come and just kind of share with you what we've been hearing more of. And so we've picked these 3 topics. Some of them, may just be some ideas to keep in the back of your mind. Some may be something where you do, an advisory committee and look a little bit more on what's going on. And some, are definitely a bigger picture, something down the road that we can maybe all work together and create some kind of change in the future to stop this from happening. But it's our hope that we can bring these topics to you to make you aware of what we are seeing and, unfortunately, some of the devastating things that are going on along the shoreline towns. So I guess I'll just kind of jump right in and talk about the first topic. If some of you were here last year, you may remember that one of the topics was about making sure that there be advocates in the hospitals for those having an evidence collection kit, also known as a rape kit. Due to COVID, there was quite a bit of times where the advocates at the Connecticut Alliance member centers weren't allowed into the hospitals to advocate for those having an evidence collection kit, and sometimes it was being done by phone. The Women and Family Center Sexual Assault Crisis Services, so not to be confused with the Women and Family Life Center, the Women and Family Center Sexual Assault Crisis Services, which is located in Meriden and New Haven, was able to work with the 7 hospitals in their territory. So that included Yale New Haven, Yale St. Ray's, Yale Pediatric, Yale Shoreline Guilford, Midstate in Meriden, Middlesex in Middletown, and then Middlesex on the shoreline in Westbrook. And they were very fortunate to create a tablet program. So little things of how that kind of conspired is they were able to work very closely with their hospitals to come up with this program. They were an organization that actually offered to purchase the tablets to go into, to be actually placed in the hospitals. But with the hospitals, they did not want to have the responsibility if something were to have happened to these tablets. But the hospitals were like, hey, it's a tablet. We have plenty of tablets here with COVID, and for our patients to be able to virtually see their families and get that support, we can take one of the tablets and just earmark it for evidence collection kits. They were able to work with these 7 hospitals and have the tablets routed through the hospital's internal Wi-Fi. So if probably everyone's been in a hospital once or twice before, and if you try to use your cell phone, you don't really get the best reception, unfortunately. So they were able to have these tablets internally routed for the Wi-Fi. And then the Women and Family Sexual Assault Crisis Services had the HIPAA FERPA compliant Zoom. And so when there were cases of sexual assault and somebody was in the hospital for an evidence collection kit, if for some reason they weren't allowed in the hospital because of COVID, or if a victim just choose not to have somebody else there, they could remotely log in via Zoom. And one thing we're hoping is that something could be done to have this be a standard thing in all Connecticut hospitals. The CHA is the Connecticut Hospital Association. They have been involved with discussions with member centers, as well as the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. And it was seeming like again, kind of what women and families saw is that they didn't want to have a tablet there that somebody had given to them and have that be responsible. But I think it may be something, and this is something that's come up on the task force, where it'd be simple enough if a hospital purchased a tablet or took a tablet that's not really being used and earmark it for this. And what this does, it allows an advocate to virtually be with somebody who has just been a victim of sexual violence, and they can log in remotely. This doesn't stop having the advocate be there in person or anything like that. It just gives the victim, the survivor, more options. And that's exactly what these advocates do. They are all about providing power and control back to the victim, and this is just another way to do it. We don't know. I wish I had a ball that could tell me the future. Unfortunately, we don't. So we don't really know where COVID's going. We never know when there's going to be a snowstorm, an ice storm, a hurricane that will not allow advocates to get to the hospital. I know in the springtime, there was a massive flood, and there was advocates actually trying to go through water that was up past the door of their car, trying to get to these hospitals, and they couldn't. So it was nice that they were virtually able to be with the victims during this time. This is great, again, if we have a pandemic, a snowstorm, a hurricane, things like that, but it also allows the victims in the hospital to have another choice. So when you are having an evidence collection kit, you have a nurse, you have a doctor, you may have somebody running back and forth doing meds. You are allowed to have somebody from your family or friend, that comfort person, and then you are allowed to have an advocate. That's a lot of people in a very tiny room during a very, very invasive procedure that can take anywhere up to 6 or 8 hours typically. And unfortunately, some hospitals, they're not supposed to, but they do say you're only allowed to have one person. So you can either have that friend or family or an advocate. That should never be the case. They should always be allowed to have both. But sometimes victims are put in that circumstance where they have to choose, which they shouldn't. There have been incidents that I can share with you, because as you may remember, I used to be the director of the Women and Family Sexual Assault Crisis Services when these tablets were implemented. And we do have a couple of people who used to work there and who currently work there now, and they can share their experience. But a couple of cases I can share is where it allowed more control. So there was one advocate who did remotely log in, and she was able to just speak with the doctor directly. She was like, can you please pass the tablet to the doctor? I need to say something to them. It allowed the victim to take a little more control. So during the kit, if there was something that she didn't want somebody to see, so like during the vaginal exam, she literally just turned the tablet around, kept it at her face, nothing else. Also allowed people to just cover up their camera if they wanted to. So it gave them more control there than they necessarily would have if somebody was in the room with them. Another example that we did have is that a victim did not want to have an advocate in the room. She wanted somebody to be there to advocate. She just didn't want somebody there. She wasn't really keen on the phone, but she loved the idea of the tablet. So this way it allowed to have an advocate be present that normally would not be present in this situation. So these are just a couple of examples of why it's come up in the task force and what we've heard from different member centers of why this may be a nice idea for all of the hospitals in Connecticut going forward. And I'm going to stop talking at that, and if anyone wants to jump in, anybody maybe from Women and Families or who used to work there who want to kind of share the experience of what went on utilizing the tablets. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to join in.
Hi, I'm Susan. I work at Women and Families. I am a sexual assault advocate, And I just wanted to share with you that the tablets allowed us to do our job. There was no interruption once they were established with COVID, and we felt like we were still able to offer quality services to our clients. And I just want to speak into a minute. Why can't there just be a phone call? I think it's an honor and a privilege to sit with someone and be there at one of the worst times of their whole life. And having a face there just adds to the comfort level. I become a real person. I'm not just an operator. On a phone, I could just appear like an operator and that I'm just here and I may go. Now there's a face, there's a connection. And there's also a person saying that I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna walk with you through it. And it just has a lot more voice to it than just a voice, because there's a face, there's eyes looking with compassion upon them. So that's why I believe that the tablets are invaluable.
Thank you, Susan. I see we have a couple hands raised. So State Representative Holly Cheeseman, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I apologize, I had to step away for a minute. So one question, I know the tablets provided that needed option. Did you run into hospitals not permitting people to come in during COVID at all? Because I know that was one of the issues we saw with the nursing homes, and we did pass legislation saying, you could name a person who was always going to be allowed in. So did you find that was the case? And so that's my first question.
Unfortunately, that was a big situation in why Women and Family Sexual Assault Crisis Services went ahead and worked with our hospital so closely to make this happen, because they were saying, nobody in. As the pandemic went on, rules were changing. They were considering some of the advocates as employees, but at the same time, there were still those chances where an advocate would show up and they're like, sorry, we're not letting anybody in. And then there was also the situations where advocates were like, I can't risk my life technically going into a hospital during this pandemic and potentially catching COVID and bringing it back to my family. So this actually allowed some advocates to still virtually be with those victims and survivors. So it looks like she may have frozen. So I see a couple more hands raised. So John Michael.
Hey, Jennifer, thanks for having us and doing this and organizing, and thanks everyone for being here. You may have spoken to this earlier, Jennifer. I'm just curious, whose responsibility was it to make sure that the tablets got into people's hands? Curious like where that staffing came from and if that was an issue at all. And then also, do you have a sense that everyone that wanted a tablet was able to get it? Do you have any data around if this program fell short at all, or if it was actually able to fill the full need that was there?
So I can speak on, so I'm trying to make sure I got the first question. So who had responsibility of the tablets? So what it was done is by working with the hospitals, we worked with like patient care managers, representatives, different things like that. Sometimes it was the charge nurses. Every hospital had somebody kind of different that kind of worked with us. And so they were the ones that spoke with their nursing staff. And so what Women and Family Sexual Assault Crisis Services did is they created just kind of like a one-pager that says, hey, this is how it goes. So when you go to, how it works is when they call the hotline, the advocate answers and says, if they want somebody to come in, if that was possible, if they want to do it virtually over the computer with a tablet, and the advocate would give the nurse the ID and the passcode to log in, and that's how it was handled. I'm trying to think of instances where they really couldn't do that. I think the biggest thing, and to be completely honest, if they were worried about a tablet that wasn't charged, but for the most part, I don't believe that we really ever had the issues with the tablets not being charged. Anytime there were situations where if there was a nurse who was handling the kit that wasn't up to speed, because unfortunately the hospitals did see a lot of turnover in their staffing, that if they weren't up to speed on this like one pager to allow us to do the tablets, where they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And sometimes advocates would be like, is there a supervisor that we can talk to get this tablet in? And so there were times where we weren't able to do that because there was a staff that was not up to date because of the high turnover that was going on in the hospitals.
Thanks.
Thank you. I see another hand up, State Senator Christine Cohen.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks so much to the Women and Family Life Center for hosting this. It's always, a great forum that we always have productive conversation, and I know that we've had some great bills come out of it in the past. I just wonder, is this purely something that's come out of COVID, or do you think that this is sort of the way technology is, driving us into the future? And telehealth has been a lifesaver, just in general, for so many, especially in the field of mental health. But I think that there is a little bit of pushback on one side in terms of, does it really replace that human interaction, compassionate care? And I just wondered your thoughts on that. And also, I know that there's a commission, and this may be something for my colleagues as well, or maybe you've had interaction with them on this, but I know that there's a commission for sexual assault response. And I just wondered if this has come before them, in the recent past.
In no way, shape, or form are the tablets to replace an actual person being there. It's just to allow an additional option. It should always be the primary goal to have an actual advocate in that room with a person. So this is kind of just like that back step. Did it come from COVID? Yes, this is absolutely one of those things where they saw there was an issue and let's try and fix this issue. Hopefully we'll never have another pandemic. That'd be great. Hopefully, we'll never have another 3-foot snowstorm or hurricane, but we never know. So this is kind of just one of those things that if we could put this in place now, could be preventative, could help to have that option versus not having anybody there or over the phone. As Susan said, it is that way to get some kind of personal connection if you can't be in the hospital. I do not know, maybe Lucy from the Connecticut Lines may be able to speak to that if she knows if this has come up in that committee. I do not know. If anybody else knows that, please feel free to jump on in.
Hi, everyone. This is Lucy Nolan. I'm with the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. And this is an issue we worked a lot on last year, that some hospitals don't want to have the problem is we would offer to give tablets, and some of the hospitals didn't want the responsibility of having another, organization's tablets on there. And so I think what Jennifer is suggesting is actually a good idea if there's a regulated way to do it. However, this has been an issue we've been talking about. It's a safe commission for the nurses for the forensic evidence collection. Frankly, one of the issues with that is that there's a lack of nurses, sane and safe nurses who can do the forensic evidence, the kits. And so at this point, that's one of the things that they're working on, is trying to figure out how to increase those numbers. But there is the Evidence Commission. There's a number of commissions that are working, that work together on sexual assault evidence collection.
Thank you, Lucy. So again, it's a thought, it's something that has been implemented with one of the Alliance's member centers, the Women and Family Center Sexual Assault Crisis Services, that is located in Meriden and New Haven. And again, they worked closely with their 7 hospitals to allow this to happen. And so it was very beneficial. If there's anybody else that wants to touch on this, their personal experience, I believe William Vitalis, who is the CEO of Women and Family Center, was trying to make it today, but doesn't look like he was able to join us. But that's just kind of one of the topics. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in connection with the Women and Families Sexual Assault Crisis Services. They just had a new director start on Monday, and I can also pass along their information as well as Wayne's if you have any questions to kind of see how that went. So we can move right along to our next agenda item. And I'm going to pass this on to Nora Hartlip. She is a person who is on our task force. And where is she? Oh, trying to see if she's there. So Nora, I'm just going to pass it on to you if you want to jump right in and you can talk about the Handle with Care.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you to all the representatives who are here as well. I wanted to share an idea that we maybe had to maybe create an advisory committee in the state of Connecticut for. Law enforcement officers frequently encounter children who have been exposed to traumatic events, such as domestic violence incidents, the arrest of a parent for any criminal activity. Because these children's brains are not fully developed, these adverse childhood experiences can cause children to have a difficult time processing what happened and responding to these situations. And the children are still expected to return to school the next day. They're expected to perform well, even though they just experienced a life-altering event. If children mess up at school the next day, they're often met with behavioral discipline, which then compounds the trauma. And some research shows that these experiences can lead to toxic stress, which may change brain development and impact attention, decision-making, and learning, all of which are crucial for educational success. Law enforcement officers who respond to these events where a child was exposed to traumatic events are uniquely situated to help the affected child. Many states in the US, including New Jersey, West Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, and more, have implemented a simple yet powerful program called Handle with Care. When law enforcement encounters a child at the scene of an incident, they identify the child and send notice to their school that they were involved in a police incident the night before and may have academic or behavioral problems the next day. The notice includes no details about the incident and only contains the child's name and 3 words, with the discretion of the parent, and those 3 words are handle with care. This ensures that children are treated with empathy and trauma-informed responses are utilized and services are given to students should they need it. The goal of the program is to give a school notice when a student has been identified at the scene of a traumatic event so the school can handle the child with care. Some measures the school can implement include postponing a test, reteaching lessons, foregoing disciplinary action for missed homework assignments, and referring the child to counselors. The child can be any student that's enrolled in a preschool through 12th grade at a private or public school. The Handle with Care notice is completed by a law enforcement officer who responds to or encounters a traumatic incident with a child present. This notice includes the child's name, grade, school, and date and time of the incident, and protects the privacy of the child by not including any details about the incident. The notice is then sent to a school employee who has been identified as a point of contact by the school or a board of education, so that person is already identified in advance. That person is then responsible for informing the teachers who come in contact with the child, so that can include any of the teachers, and just lets them know to handle them with care that day. The notice can cover a wide array of traumatic events where police are involved, including possibly a search warrant being executed, maybe they witnessed an overdose, any type of community violence that they witnessed, or even the death of a family member, just anything that a police officer or peace officer may be present. And in order to ensure the privacy is protected at all costs, this will come with an opt-out option where the parent can simply just decline to offer any of the information. So then the school would not be notified at all. So that definitely gives the power back to the guardians in that situation. But by simply giving the option, we are giving schools more abilities to service children through trauma and hardships. The children in Connecticut could greatly benefit by using this program, so that I ask that you consider creating an advisory committee to look into creating this program in Connecticut. I'm happy to answer any questions about the program, but thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you, Nora. And an example I can give you is, so it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual violence or domestic violence. So a situation that we are aware of that just happened last week, the week before, that a 15-year-old boy woke up to his bedroom being on fire, like right next to him, flames and everything. Woke up, was living with his mother and his grandparents at the time, was able to wake everybody up, get everybody safe. police came, fire department, fire investigator, things like that. Apparently those little waterfall fountains that you keep, like that you may have for little decor, they have to be plugged into a surge protector. So just letting people know if you have that, but that's what caused the fire. But this young man, this boy really woke up to his room being on fire. And if anyone has ever had a house fire, it can be very traumatic, but no less to actually wake up to it and have your bed be on fire that you're sleeping in. And the school was, there was nothing in between with the law enforcement reaching out to the school. But finally the mother she noticed that her son was dealing with some serious PTSD from this and reached out to the school and was like, hey, we had a trauma situation at our house. Can you please just watch out for my son? And it was a good thing because the son really, he was not taking phone calls or really anything. He was internally trying to deal with this. And what this allows is just the school to know, hey, something's happened, maybe the teacher, maybe it's the guidance counselor, could be a school-based clinician, which would be wonderful because then they also get that benefit of a youth and family services as well. If that school-based clinician works for a youth and family services, kind of like with the Mass and Youth and Family Services, that sort of thing. But it allows, thanks Scott, saw that thumbs up, but it allows them to have, to just have this awareness of, there's some trauma going on with this child. Unfortunately, if anybody follows any of the local social media and stuff, there's trauma going on with the youth. In not just in the shoreline, not just in the state, but in the country. And this is just another way that we can say, hey, there's somebody here. There's somebody that's trained here to help and listen to you. And that's kind of what this program is. And, as Nora said, an advisory committee could be something great to see how this might work for the state of Connecticut, how it might differ between towns and cities and things like that. I do see we saw in the chat, Detective Law said, being in law enforcement, I think it's a great idea. In Guilford, we usually notify the school resource officers so they are aware of any incidents, but this could be useful. So thank you, Detective Law, for speaking up and saying that. This is an open, roundtable. Please, anyone jump in and please join the conversation.
This is Megan from CCADV. I know Jen and I talked about this, and Lucy and I already talked about this, but I know at least for CCADV and the Alliance and some of our partners, we have some concerns about this, how this might play out for victims and children and their confidentiality. So, as well as sort of the issues around racial equity. So we would certainly be in favor of an advisory committee, but don't necessarily love the New Jersey model, the way that it's set up. So that's just a heads up from us.
Thanks, Megan. And I think it's important to note that New Jersey did have some problems after this was implemented. And that's why the idea of having advisory task force to see how it works with Connecticut and things that go on, and also having this opt-in, opt-out, giving that power and control back to the primary, secondary victims, the parents, if somebody is old enough to help make that decision. Because for advocates, they can speak for the fact is they're all about giving that power and control back. They don't want to take anything away from a primary, secondary victim. So as Nora said, having that opt-in, opt-out. So great, thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
Yes, Representative Comey.
Hi, thank you. To Megan's point, I would be interested in seeing what some of the other sort of hurdles that have happened in the other states, and I think that that's a great way with an advisory committee to sort of dip our toes in. But certainly on the face, we want to give children as much support as we can, and I love this idea. And the also concern is sort of this inequity issue, to Megan's point, within districts, within schools. Just from a personal experience, in Branford, we have tons of resources. We're so fortunate. And my son just started a magnet school in New Haven for high school, and it became, recently it became very clear to me certainly the lack of support that they have in comparison to some of our shoreline communities or other suburban districts. So I just wanted to sort of flag that as well, but Megan beat me to it, so that's good.
That's really unfortunate to hear that about the school your son's attending. That's definitely a whole thing that I think needs to be addressed, you know, in part with this and then even separately, because as what we're seeing with society, children need help more now than ever, you know, with what's going on in the world and when you throw in social media and everything like that. So thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate that. Anyone doesn't have anything else? I did see, and let's make sure, yes. So Wayne Vitales, who is the CEO of the Women and Family Center that we were just speaking about with the tablets, he did join. So I just want to give him a minute if he wants to say or share anything about the tablets and what he saw as the CEO who oversees that center. So if you want to speak, Wayne, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Hello all, my name is Wayne Vitales. I'm the CEO of the Women and Family Center. We provide sexual assault services to all of Middlesex and New Haven County, including the shoreline area. We have offices in Meriden, New Haven, and we also have a new office in Guilford. Guilford being one of our areas of service, we want to have a physical presence in the shoreline and help the many individuals who have gone through a very traumatic experience of a sexual violence down in that area. Jennifer was the director of our program pretty much all the way through COVID. We were very fortunate to have such a great leader helping us meander our way through that time, and she did a great job, and I really appreciate it. We do have a new director now that she's moved on to now that Jennifer has moved on to the Women and Family Life Center. To my right is Ann Malisk, our new director. Ann comes to us from the Susan B. Anthony Project up in Torrington, where she was a sexual assault and domestic violence advocate in the Torrington and northwestern corner of the state. So we're very fortunate to have Ann with us, and I just want to introduce her, and I think Ann would love to be a part of this task force going forward. And Ann, do you want to say anything?
Sure. I just want to say hello. This is a great forum. I wish more areas of the state would do more of this. And I will speak on the tablet just briefly. We had a large disconnect due to COVID with the hospitals in the northwest corner. And I know that Susan B. Anthony Project is diligently working on retraining and focusing on, bridging the gaps and bringing those relationships back together and stronger. So the tablets would have been an invaluable process for the hospitals and the advocates. And so this is a great idea.
And I will say that one of the outcomes we did notice was that with the use of a virtual accompaniment and the tablet, after someone who's gone such a traumatic experience, we actually saw a higher percentage of victims accessing our services and allowing our advocates to advocate for them in the hospital, because by using a tablet, you don't have another person in the room. It's when they're having a evidence collection kit administered, things like that, it's very, very personal. And having somebody that's there virtually and not physically was actually more comfortable for a lot of the victims. So there's actually a bit of a positive outcome by being a little bit virtual as well. But Jennifer, thank you very much for putting this together, and thank you everybody for all that you do for the victims of sexual and domestic violence. And we hope to create some great partnerships going forward. Thanks, Jen.
Just wanted to make sure you had that chance to talk. Oh, and I see a race. This is one of our board members, Beth.
Hi,
Beth.
I'm Beth. Yeah. Oh, can you hear me? I'm not.
We can.
Zoom. Yeah, I'm Beth Fecco Curtis. I'm a board member at Women and Family Life, and are participating today as a very interested resident of Connecticut. So I appreciate everyone's time this morning. I actually, one of the advantages of Zoom, I was Googling the Handle with Care legislation while I'm sitting in front of my computer, and just really wanted to chime in and say there's probably a lot of learning that can be done from other states that have implemented programs and legislation such as this. So I realize there's a lot of subject matter expertise right here on this call, but I think it would be wonderful to be able to learn from other programs in other states as well. So.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that would be the nice thing, if we could do an advisory committee, looking at the other states, the pros, the cons. Let's be honest, nothing's perfect, but just how we can really assist our youth. So another hand raised, Brittany, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany. I work at Family Centered Services in New Haven. I am part of the Neighborhood Victim Advocacy Program. So we work with victims of crime, and we have a child advocate on our team. And one thing that just really strikes me about this program is that a lot of our children, after an incident, decide not to go to school because of the fear of not having homework, or the fear of having to explain to teachers or counselors the things that have happened. And that results in very frequent absences. So students are dealing with having to stay back because of so many frequent absences. And I think that this would just provide them a little peace of mind, that the teachers and counselors will be already aware. And so they don't have to go to school with that fear, and they don't have to avoid school because of that fear either. So I just think that this might be a really good way to combat all of those absences for students who are dealing with constant police calls to their home.
Brittany, thank you. And I'm so glad you just mentioned that homework piece about that, because that's a great example of, what this program could be there for. If my kid didn't have their homework, can you please not give them a detention, because that detention could set that child just over that limit of just not knowing what's going on. So small little thing, but I think it's a very huge piece. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. So we do have Scott from Mass Youth and Family Services, who would likely briefly raise the issue of violence prevention if that's appropriate. Absolutely, Scott, jump right on in.
Hi, everybody. Just appreciate being a part of the conversation. And this is not something that you're all talking about now, but we do a high school survey here in Madison based on the Search Institute survey of developmental assets. We had an addendum, and we ran it this past fall. We've been aware from students, primarily our high school groups, reporting to us a lot of concerns around mental health, but also about sexual violence, sexual harassment. And our survey results sadly sort of reinforce a lot of the things that we've heard from our teenagers here. And one of the things that we found, and just looking at the data we got back, there's a growing gap. So what we're seeing is students that identify as female are trending down in terms of things like self-esteem, self-purpose, where males tend to stay just about the same over time. So the bottom line is there's a widening gap and some very concerning indicators around the social emotional wellness of our girls. And we're seeing that too in other populations, student populations, the LGBTQ plus population. So very concerning. And again, like the data just sort of supports the things that we're already hearing anecdotally. My fear, I think probably the fear of most of us that are worried about our kids, the influences on the development of our kids as they're growing up in terms of gender roles, in terms of problem solving and sexuality are skewed toward the unhealthy, and they're outpacing what we're doing for prevention by huge amounts. And we're seeing this in terms of younger kids as well, indicators in younger populations. So I just wanted to state that out loud. And we have some ideas of things that we're doing internally with our school system, and have some other ideas that I will reach out to you, Jen, that I've had, some people here have had, to get you more involved. But wanted to mention that because I think, we need to be looking at what we're doing to make better generations of people going forward, and want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. And thanks for everybody for your time.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I think what you said was really spot on. One thing I do want to kind of touch on that you had mentioned is with the sexual violence increase, and I think that's a huge thing. From the very first legislative roundtable that Women and Family Life did, there was the topic of how do we really go forward and push, basically Aaron's Law that requires that the public schools K through 12 do some kind of sexual violence prevention every year, and just how sad how many districts are not doing it, and just what we're really seeing today if that comes about. I know the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence has come up with the all into out and really just kind of stepping up to get this prevention in the schools. But unfortunately, it's up to the schools, it's up to the districts, it's up to the superintendents, the coordinator for the health and wellness to really reach out to, whether it's the member centers, whether it's private groups, whether it's they're training their staff to do these sexual violence education trainings, but also you need to look at what Scott was talking about. Do you have somebody come in who talk about healthy masculinity like Mass Youth and Family does do with their schools, or have these groups where females might be able to talk to somebody, or how are we helping our LGBT youth? So these are all different topics that we really need to be mindful of, and how this also could play a role with this, handle with care if, parents see something at home or something like that. So I appreciate you, Scott. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Just check and see if anyone else has their hand raised or dropped anything in the chat. Next, I would like to introduce Tabitha Brown. So Tabby, I'm just gonna go to Tabby. That's how we all know her here. So she is the shoreline diversion specialist. So she actually works for the Beth L in Milford, but it's great. We do have this amazing MOU partnership with them. So Tabby is actually with the Women and Family Life Center 2 days a week, working with, we refer to her, who are having housing issues, whether they are facing foreclosure, eviction, and unfortunately some of the statistics that she sees. And if any of you read the newsletter and my statement last month, about 80% of the people that we do refer to her are dealing with domestic violence. So I'd like to welcome Tabby, and I'll let her kind of take it away and share some of the things that she has been seeing with her clients.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for, having the opportunity to speak. When I first started this job, I didn't, I really thought I was going to be working with individuals and help them, be diverted from shelter services, because that's really what I am. I'm the last step before someone goes into shelter if they have income. I cover 7 towns. Some of the representatives have heard this information before, but I'm going to share it again. So I'm a part of the small cities grant that was written and put in place to help those that are homeless. And Jennifer is right. 80% of the individuals that come to me through Women and Family Life or community partners on my 7-town shoreline, or the 7 towns I serve on the shoreline, are DV related. I have stories about people coming and showing up with children and not being, they're going through 2 separate systems to try to get assistance. They can't get housing because I technically can't work with them because they don't have income. So they really should be going into like a DV shelter situation. And because we don't have those shelters on the shoreline, Jennifer can attest to where they all are. She was able to do it for me one day, and I just kind of opened my eyes. But one of the biggest reasons I'm here and I want to talk about that is to to help everybody understand that homelessness and DV are not are not separate issues. They are running hand in hand. And as legislation is changed and put more across the board as what is considered domestic violence, whether it's financial, emotional, mental, all of those pieces. We end up being put in a situation where we on the shoreline have no place to put these individuals. One of the things that I had gone to Rep. Comey and Rep. Candelora with and said, I really want to start this conversation. We need something here on the shoreline to protect families, specifically individuals, but with families, they cannot disappear. They're required to put their children in school. They can be found, and they're at risk every single day. Our DV shelters are very different from our homeless shelters. The requirements are different. There's a different set of, there's way more protection in a DV shelter. So I always my biggest intent is to start the conversation. One of the things that I said to Rep. Candelora was, and I said this to Rep. Comey, 4 of the 7 towns that I serve don't have a homeless line item. That also means the other 3 towns that have it have to they provide services to residents that are currently, or their last known address is in that existing town. Otherwise, their services and their resources would be null and void, and they couldn't even help the individuals in their own town. I'm asking to start the conversation. I'm asking to consider, looking at, is there a way to put a homeless line item or a DV line item into and have it be one and the same? If the person's coming into a situation in a town where they were on the shoreline and were able to have a place to go if they can't get into a DV shelter. Now, mind you, there is not one on the shoreline to speak of. Exactly. You know what I mean? It's great that we have the services here, but when we have, I had a family come in, it was a mother and 3 children, and all the children were 17 and under, and the mother was being controlled by a partner, and it was affecting the children. And she got here, a DV partner put her on a plane and sent her back to her hometown in Connecticut, her home state. She got here, there was nothing we could offer her. We couldn't offer her DV shelter because at the time, and the way that, policies are written for that is the perpetrator's not in the state. But she also cannot hide because she has 3 children that are minors. She has to put them in school. So she is at risk every day. Did she go find a job? Did I do my job? Did I do the CAN assessment with her? Did I call Safe Connect with her? Yes, I did all that stuff. But still, because of the way the policy is written, we need to relook at that and have that conversation about what are we doing to protect homeless individuals due to DV with minor children. That's a big piece that we need to look at, talk about, and decide, where are we going with that? How are we going to protect them? I understand we need to protect the individuals in the state, but I've also had experiences where I have called and the person is still in the same town and they were not able to access, there was no place for them to go. Not because, 211 or Safe Connect couldn't do it, or we don't, or 211 didn't want to put them into shelter or CAN Navigator, because that's part of what I do, but because there was no place to put them. There was no safe place to put them. No minor child should ever have to worry about, is this guy going to show up after I've heard him say, I'm going to kill you? we don't know. She got here, he could get here. Just saying, we need to start having that conversation about the homeless line item and how it connects to domestic violence. And we need to start that conversation of how are we going to change policies to help those individuals that do have, that are coming in with nothing, you know, and where do we put them? And as I said to both Rep. Candelora and Rep. Comey, because of I serve so many towns, I don't understand how we have not come together yet and understand that I'm not asking one town to put out the money and be responsible for everything. But if we can do a small cities and pull in multiple community partners to support the can entry and the homeless, there's got to be a way to pull 7 towns together and say, we needed at the very least, a DV shelter, a family DV shelter here on the shoreline. Do I think it's going to magically happen? No, I don't, but I want to start talking about it. I want it to be a reality, because it is every day for me and for my partners, all of my community partners. And I want you to understand something. A lot of my assessments come through 211. 80% of my assessments for DV come through community partners on the shoreline, because they need that one-to-one contact. They need it. They need somebody to talk to. They need somebody to help them navigate through the system. They are in trauma and they are in crisis. So thank you for listening to me. Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about the whole homelessness and how it's connected to DV, and wanting to have that conversation. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tabby. I did see a couple hands pop up. First one is Megan.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Tabby, for sharing that. I think all I really kind of want to add to this is I think, the legislature, I think back in 2008, did a really great thing and did create a line item around sheltering for DV. It's been $5 million, the same amount since 2008. And our capacity has been, for the last 5 years, not even including the pandemic, 150% for sheltering. So we've been obviously creative with hoteling over the past couple of years, but we certainly are doing the same, trying to serve more people with the same amount of funding that we had since 2008, and we're certainly appreciative of it, and don't want that to go away. But as you can imagine, I think what Tabby is basically describing is sort of a at the bigger picture level, what's happening on the ground. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that people are safe. And obviously the pandemic has increased the need for housing services, not just shelter, but our rapid rehousing program has been very successful. And as we are moving forward, we're really looking at how do we expand. We just applied for a grant for full-time housing advocates for across the state. Through our DV programs, but they are unique in terms of the services you do get at DV shelters are very different and very much survivor focused than the services that you would get at one of our homeless shelter partners. So, we're certainly very much invested in finding creative ways to solve our funding and our resource issue as we move forward. But I just wanted to point out it's a sort of a anecdote or a result of a bigger systemic issue that we are every day working to address. And so we do try to help those that we can and move people into hotels that we can. It's been very costly, and without the CARES money, most of our sites across the state probably wouldn't be open at this point if they had to plan for those line items. Just to give you a sense, most of our 18 sites have a line item usually about $5,700 for hoteling. We are working on our CARES money that we've spent for hoteling and other COVID related services is almost $2 million. at this point. So each of our sites has been working tirelessly to address the issue of individuals having to leave during a pandemic, but this has been an issue prior to the pandemic and will continue to be an issue. So I don't know that a shelter on the shoreline is going to solve that totally, but you know, certainly more resources to domestic violence services and obviously sexual assault services in the future, I think will serve people generationally over time.
Thank you, Megan. I would like to notate that, you know, Alyssa Martin, who is the program director with New Horizons in Middletown. So that is one of the member domestic violence centers. She did put in the chat that this is a challenge that they are experiencing with our clients as well. If they have space for our clients living on the shoreline, we'd have to relocate, which can add stress to their healing journey. So, Melissa, I appreciate you typing that in the chat. And if you want to join in the conversation, please absolutely do so. I do see, oh, there's that hand raised too. I do see Representative Comey, her hand's been raised for a while, so I'll let her jump in. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Tabby. You know, we sat down for, I think, more than an hour and had a really frank conversation. And I think I walked out of there confused by, I mean, I think to your point, the system is so confused, right? You have so many different rules that you have the HUD rules that involve children under 17, if I remember. And but you did mention that that the waiting list can be like 53 days long. So I remember you telling me that. And then there's all these income guidelines that are also hugely a huge barrier for that. I guess can you talk a little bit about the federal, you know, the federal stuff that you were telling me about the young kids when you have the young kids involved?
I kind of need you to clarify because I talked about so much.
You were talking about, I guess well, we were talking about the disabled kids, right? I mean, disabled kids over 18, right. And how they can't be in a shelter together and things like that.
So this, not specifically for DV shelter, because the criteria is different my boss, Jen Paradis, is here, and she's the executive director of Bethel Center. So she may be able to also add or define something that I can't because she does it every day. But yes, if they do not have a minor child under the age of 17, it's technically not considered family shelter. But what that means is that it doesn't mean they can't go into shelter. It just means that they won't, like there's a women's dorm, a men's dorm, and family shelter. And Jen, please correct me if I'm wrong. Family shelter is for any parenting families that have children under the age of 17. So that changes the dynamic a little bit. And sometimes I know there's been at the discretion if the child is disabled in some way, and the parent is required, you know, has guardianship or that sort of thing. So yeah, it's not just our family, the way our families look are not necessary, and that's according to HUD. That's HUD's description of what a family is. You know, I don't think it's a I think they're just trying to do a general thing across the board to cover everybody. But in reality, our families look very different. We have same-sex couples, we have LGBTQ, we have transgender, we have, you know, and it runs a very different gambit as to what a family is and how they meet that criteria to go into shelter. Do we have a great family program as far as getting families in, not so much getting them sheltered, but getting them in a safe place? Yes, but there's still a wait list, and no family should be on a wait list. But it takes a lot of, you know, as a navigator and calling 211 and having a conversation with this family, it's a lot of investigation on my part. Who are you staying with? I need to talk to who you're staying with. I have to confirm you have an end date. I need to put this in HMIS. I have to check in with you every single day to know where you are and what you're doing, and then add mandated reporter to that. That. You know, I gave you an example, I remember, Robin, of what it was like to do a 211 assessment. And you just, when you were done looking at me, you were like, you looked overwhelmed and overloaded. And I'm like, but I do this every day. So I guess I just know people are in crisis, and you have to do what you can do to help assess them. But Jen, is anything that I said incorrect, or does it need to be tweaked?
Hi, and I'm so sorry for jumping in. This has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you, Tabby. And I was just typing something into the chat, so not to be interruptive. I mean, I think what we're really seeing is the needs of the domestic violence population that we serve along the shoreline being greater in both breadth, right, and depth, than what the homeless response system is really established to do. I mean, Tabby's role is prevention, quite frankly, around navigating folks away from shelter as their homeless resolution and into stability faster. The folks that she more often, I mean, the kind of radical statistic of 80% is startling. What she sees are families that really are not suitable to the interventions that Tabby has available to her. Those interventions are focused on short-term, brief, require a lot, to her point, of verification around someone's current housing status. All of these things are incredibly invasive, quite frankly, and are really focused on getting all the information that you can as to determine and leverage resources, both in kind, natural resources, and couple them with the supports available from the homeless response system. We have, great diversion success, but when it comes to this specific domestic violence population or people experiencing domestic violence, those barriers become a lot higher, and what we often see is the ping pong back and forth between the domestic violence system and the homeless response system, and where does this family fall and what resources do they need at this time. Really what this family needs, especially families that are fleeing, is safety and security, and the homeless response system isn't equipped to be able to immediately react and respond to that at this time. And Megan, shared what her system is experiencing, around 150% capacity for shelters, for DV shelters, and for non-DV shelters, right, the rest of the pie. It's a very similar reality. Is that as the pandemic continues, as housing expenses continue to skyrocket, as other expenses continue to skyrocket, shelter is a reality for more and more households in Connecticut. And our communities along that shoreline are really suffering. And so we're happy to clarify in any way that we can. I think the conversation around the federal guidelines and, how that boils down to practice, daily practice. What I'll say is this, is that, we have a few different kind of standards, and this is not necessarily new information to everybody on the call, around what identifies a literally homeless family. For HUD, that is, there's literal living in places not meant for human habitation, at imminent risk, vulnerable youth under the age of 25, and domestic violence being an immediate housing identifier or homeless identifier. As children get involved, those and the Department of Education has different, kind of a little bit of a different criteria. They account for what I would say is the true housing stability number, or instability number, when identifying families who are doubled up, whether unsafe or safe, living together in households, living in temporary housing like hotels, motels, And so there's a lot of variation is the point. And it is quite complex around how we're defining these families, and so what resources are available to them. You know, what we, into Tabby's point, and I'll shut up after this, is really to do an analysis of how many folks we have coming into the system needing resources like shelter, who have those vulnerabilities from overcoming domestic violence, and what are those specific resources that they are in need of. A lot of these folks do not have access to their bank accounts, vital documents, and those are all necessary in order to be successful immediately in the homeless response system. And so that's how issues are being kind of treated at this point in time. You know, we have a hammer, so every problem is a nail. But so I'll you know, kind of shut up now. But thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you. I think it's great that everyone gets to hear from you and how you and Tabby work together, what you've seen. I know, Alyssa, you've been patiently having your hand raised, so I'll let you kind of jump in at this point. You are muted.
Yeah, thank you. Truly, I don't think there's anything else I can say that hasn't been so eloquently said by Tabby and Jennifer, and then Megan as well, because Megan does, you know, as New Horizons is a member of the coalition, Megan does speak for all 18 member organizations. So, but I did want to say, because I can speak to what New Horizons experiences with these issues, like as Megan mentioned, on the ground, like the day-to-day, right? So we actually share the way the member coalition's catchment areas are divided up. We share the shoreline with BH Care, the Umbrella Center, and I believe it's Safe Futures on the other side. We share, so the three of us together kind of share that shoreline area. We know, and especially as I've come to know in my tenure as director, that the shoreline community as a whole is much more, you know, it's much more, you're interconnected together, and that's, and it's been a privilege to learn that and know that. But in terms of a kind of a new shelter space, I think that's definitely a question I want to bring back to the member meetings we have, because New Horizons, we're the smallest shelter in the state. We have 10 beds. That's it. We are definitely a site that relies on hoteling. We've spent a significant amount of money on hoteling, and we do hotel when it comes to our folks that call in from the shoreline area. We you know, immediately we help them with that, kind of some of the other issues Jennifer was speaking to, like accessing bank accounts, finding safe resources for those things, additional assistance, and relying on our community partners to help us with those other needs to help rehouse or help navigate that system and those supports. But when it comes to like shelter, basic shelter, we are limited in terms of like a secure domestic violence shelter location, because, you know, hotels, we have our strategies, we have our ways to keep those folks safe and information confidential, but it's not 100% guarantee. I mean, hotels are businesses, they're open to the general public, and so so there is an additional layer of risk or consideration when we safety plan with those folks that need to rely on hoteling. So that's an ongoing conversation, and like Megan said, there's been some coalition work to kind of support these different strategies and areas, but that's just kind of in terms of working on the ground, working with in our areas on the shoreline, just for everyone's awareness, if you do need to reach out and get support for folks, is we serve Clinton, Old Saybrook, Westbrook, and I'm blanking, but like kind of that area. I think we stop at Madison and Old Lyme, so we're kind of, that's where we stop. So we're kind of more in the Clinton, Old Saybrook, like that's where New Horizons live. So just so people know that, but that's kind of just the 2 cents I want to throw in terms of what it's like on the ground, specifically at our site.
Leslie, your 2 cents is always appreciative, and I thank you for sharing the towns that you do work with, and so many of them do cross over with women and family life, as well as, you know, the representatives and senators who are here today that do oversee those towns. I'm not sure if anyone has anything else to say about this topic. I know Megan from CCADV had to join off. I wanted to see if Lucy from the Connecticut Alliance had anything she would like to share, She is the policy director with the Connecticut Alliance. So if she has any legislative task force items that she wants to share with anyone, and kind of grab your ear where she has it. If not, no worries, Lucy, but I figured I'd give you that time.
Thanks, Jenny. I just appreciate really being invited to this and being able to work with you all on these issues, because it is an area, you know, a area of the state where a lot is going on, good or for good or bad. We are, you know, currently working on working out some legislation on some bills that have passed that were didn't make it through the last couple of years due to COVID and other things. So, but our board hasn't approved our legislative agenda, so I will get it out to you all as soon as we have it. But I do think one of the things that I did mention is about the safe nurses, and we do need to have an eye towards those who we've seen it. We saw a 10% increase in the number of calls and after COVID, and we've seen increased number of children who are disclosing. And so this is a concerning time for all of us. And so we really need to sort of pull our thoughts together and make sure that we're working for sexual assault survivors, but also children who who may not even, you know, disclose until they're much older because of what's happened to them. So we need to, as Jenny said, talk about doing the prevention. There is Aaron's Law. There is legislation in the books. It was never funded. So that's why things haven't happened. We've been working with the State Department of Ed to get information out to the schools and to do the training, and all the our 9 member centers have very good training for students, but we need to really I think double down on that. And it's disturbing to hear about the Madison school data, and that's something that I think we're going to look into as well. So I hope I can follow up on that. So thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. Does anybody else have anything that they want to share at this time? No, let me quick check the chat. Doesn't look like anything. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up the 4th Legislative Roundtable. I just want to take a minute and thank all of our representatives, our senators for joining us, our community partners, our members on the Shoreline Domestic Violence, Sexual Violence Task Force. I want to thank our board of directors for being here, the staff who are here every day with Women and Family Life Center, here to help those on the shoreline in crisis. If anybody would like to reach out, get more involved in what we see, if you're not on the task force and you would like to get more on the task force, please feel free to, you can shoot us an email, you can drop your information in the chat. We will save the chat so we have that information if needed, but please do not hesitate to reach out. We are here for you any way, shape, or form. If you know somebody who's looking for services and might be a little lost, send them our way. If there's something that we do not know or something we're not doing, we're not going to leave them alone. We will help get them the resources, the references, and help walk them through everything that they need. So thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful holiday.